Okay, here we go. People are show up as they will. Okay, so when we pay attention to our lore, we have all kinds of people writing stuff and promoting it, and lots of people enjoy it, and it's been that way for a long time. People will write these powerful observations about society, and then suggest that by some, I don't know, magic connection to the Aryan myth or some other nonsense or whatever have you, we will be able to navigate these issues of the day simply by calling ourselves Asatru and wearing a hammer. I can't tell you how many books I've set down because I don't, it's the same old stuff. You pick up a book, you read it, and Jennifer, it is so good to see you.
You too. Can you see my face? I was messing around with stuff. Oh, that's me and my chicken.
I see you and your chicken.
There
you are.
We're going to go outside and hang out with the pigs while you talk, actually. How are you?
I'm good. I'm real good. I'm living in Minnesota now, but I like it.
You're in Arizona?
Minnesota.
Oh, Minnesota.
Yeah, I went up north. I like the cold. I like my pine forest and birch trees.
Yeah.
So
I remember you saying there was a good heathen community up there. He's in Minnesota now.
there is a good eating community up here. There's a bunch of good people up here. It's kind of spread far apart, but I'm like an hour and a half south of the Canadian border now. Big change from Oklahoma.
Oh. Yeah.
Exactly.
A needed change for sure.
Yeah, I got a real good job up here. I mean, it's a real good job.
Very cool.
I'm not going to say it because I'll get doxxed and run off. What's going on, man? It's good to see you.
Good to see you too, man. Yeah.
Good. So, we gonna go out there and slop the hogs while I'm talking?
Yeah. Well, she gets her cuddle time, her pig time in.
Well, wherever you need to get it.
Right.
That came out wrong. I don't want it to be perceived that way.
Yeah, man. I still work in treatment and addiction treatment, but
awesome. Good.
But I'm a program director of a treatment center now.
That is fantastic. That is good news. That's fucking awesome. That being able to help others is one of the most amazing things a person can do in their life.
Well, and one of the cool things too is I get these guys every now and then, guys and girls, like they'll ask me like, well, what do you do? And like, cause they all struggle with the faith component, especially when it's like a foreign deity. Yeah. And I tell them like, well, you know, the thing about me is like my faith allows me to stand on my feet and keep my head held high. And like my gods and goddesses don't want me humiliated, you know, because those are my ancestors.
Anybody that's been to jail or dealt with alcoholism or addiction or been divorced knows what it's like to be humiliated and have to take a forced feeding of humble pie. That's not a part of my faith. That's not a part of our life. But kind of the point I'm going to get to tonight is, where do we find in our faith where we can stand on our own 2 feet? Where are the tools necessary for me to put this into use? I've read so many books and I set them down because I'm like, this is the same repackaged, repurposed shit that doesn't make any sense. Yeah. It tells me the same story, but it doesn't show me what tools I need to put into play. And there's one story I was trying to figure out, okay, I'm going to talk about it. Where can I find it in the lore? Where can I glean some kind of information and in the best way? Because we have so much going on in the world today. There's so much nonsense seeking to distract us. And I talked a little bit about that last week when King Gilfie finally made his way to meet the Asiri. He walks in and he finds himself distracted by a juggler of 7 anlaces and games and gold roofs and all kinds of stuff. And all of that, when you change a part of your life, you seem to come across those distractions that separate us from what we need to be doing. And we don't really have anyone saying, hey, that's neat to be aware of. You should be aware of that, but that's not your primary goal. That's not your focus. That's not your path. And it's hard to do because we look at it and it seems like an imminent threat. Much of politics today, much of religion today has been, if you don't believe this, you're going to lose something. If we become what we're supposed to become, if we step into these roles that we have decided is our path, I think there's a better chance that we're going to be able to keep all of that stuff as we stand on our own feet and with equality say, no, you're not taking that from me. Instead of the self-righteous anger, gleaning onto past histories that don't make sense, that so many of us are easily done today. The righteous indignation that's promoted as a substitute for faith only burns for so long.
Right.
It only works for so long. So tonight I'm going to read about Thor's journey and how he had been hornswoggled and bamboozled and suckered into this and suckered into that. And I got comments on it. I got plenty to say. But then he said, it starts here I'm on sacred text. And the sacred text internet archive it contains a plethora of all kinds of texts. Many of them are very old and some of them are new, but I think if we limit ourselves to one simple point of view, we run the risk of not being able to develop true wisdom.
Right.
Because at some point we've got to understand what's going on in that other mind. At some point we've got to be, as a counselor, you are aware, you know what's going on in their minds.
Right.
To some degree. Nobody's created any new emotions. None of us have figured out a new way to love. None of us have figured out a new way to hate. None of us have figured out a new way to tell somebody to fuck off.
Huh.
But we do get distracted. We do allow other things to separate us from what we should be. For an alcoholic or a drug addict, it's real simple. The primary purpose is to stay sober. But after you've been sober for a while, after you've stepped out on your own, after you've grabbed a hold of the tenets of this new faith and spirituality or whatever you want to call it, where do we go from there? Where are we? What is our life supposed to look like? Should we begin to cultivate an understanding of what it needs to look like? We do. Where do you find that? Point to me a book that shows you what it should look like if you're living the lifestyle we all want to live, the one we all want to believe in. Show me which book. There are thousands of them out there that will tell you the routine observations of the armchair quarterback of today's world. But there are very, very few that say, well, maybe you need to take a look at what's going on inside yourself. Maybe you need to take a look at this, and this, and then you'll come up with an answer. And here's an instruction that's thousands of years old from an oral tradition that suggests these gods went through the same thing. They lost hands, they lost eyes, they lost children, they lost lovers, they suffered, they sacrificed. Not once do you see them allow that to distract them from becoming what they're supposed to become. And yet on a daily basis, those among us falter because we're human, I suppose. We do falter, we do fuck up, we do slip, we do want to take that lid off that pot of shit we like to carry around and take a good whiff of it, see if it still stinks all the time. Every time it does, put the lid back on it and let's move forward. It's just the way it is. But let's talk about this story here. And I'm going to read it to you and then offer a little bit of commentary. And at the end of it, when we're all done, if anybody has any questions about it, I'll be more than happy to sit here for another hour and answer whatever questions or engage in whatever discussion or higher points of mythological thought we would like to engage in. So let's begin. Then spake 3D, and be aware, I'm going to say every one of those fancy ass old words with a redneck accent, so you're going to bear with me. Now it is evident that he is resolved to know this matter, though it seems not an unpleasant thing to us. This is the beginning of this tale. Oku Thor drove forth, and with his he-goats and chariot, and with him is called Loki. Right there, you know it's going to be a goddamned issue. Then came at evening to a husbandman, and there received a night's lodging. About evening, Thor took his he-goats and slaughtered them both. After that, they were flayed and borne to the cauldron. When the cooking was done, then Thor and his companions sat down to supper. Thor invited to meet with him the husbandman and his wife and their children. The husbandman's son was called Thialfi, and the daughter Roskva. Then Thor laid the goat hides farther away from the fire and said that the husbandman and his servant should cast the bones on the goat hides. Thialfi, the husbandman's son, was holding a thigh bone of the goat and split it with his knife and broke it for the marrow. Now, I've read stories before, And it's, even if it's not, it's a real clear indication you have this deity. We are shared all of these wonderful experiences of life. Every now and again, there's something in us that says, well, I deserve a little bit more. And in other versions of the tale, it is Loki that says, go ahead, split that bone, get the sweet marrow. So the Loki, as the perception of the ego run amok, says, you know, go ahead, you're worth it, you deserve it. Haven't you worked hard for it? Let's take a little bit more than is what we've earned. And it ends up being a problem for everybody in that family. And it usually is in real life too. When we decide to take a little bit more than we've really earned, it creates resentment, frustration, and sometimes a sense of loss. When we continue to act that way, we lose of those about us that we love the most. We end up somewhere else on a different path, and then everyone's suffering because, well, in my own case, when my ego thought I was pretty fucking important about a lot of things, and there was this and there was that, you end up in a situation where that list of friends gets very thin. Just like it says in the Lord of the Rings, that list of friends grows thin. And all you're left with is a deity and the other deity that led you astray, the idea of your own set of thoughts that tells you you're greater than you really are. Some people will be able to identify with that kind of aloneness. And this young man just made a decision, and it's just like that. It's a simple decision. And in an instant, everything changes. The entirety of your life changes, takes on a new direction, and we're left struggling to put together a set of tools of how best to handle this new path I'm on in this alien world. So how does he handle it? We'll find out. Thor tarried there overnight, and in the interval before day, he rose up and clothed himself, took the hammer Mjolnir, swung it up, and hallowed the goat hides. Straightway the he-goats rose up, and then one of them was lame in a hind leg. Thor discovered this and declared that the husbandman or his household could not have dealt wisely with the bones of the goat. He knew that the thigh bone was broken. There's no need to make a long story of it. We've all been in that situation. All may know how frightened the husband must have been when he saw how Thor let his brow sink down before his eyes, when he looked at the eyes, and then it seemed to him that he must fall down before their glances alone. Many of us, before we came to this path, participated in some of those Abrahamic faiths. And many of us have sat on our knees, sometimes in tears, sometimes not, sometimes with the gun in our mouth, sometimes with a bottle of pills, sometimes just sitting there going, why can you not help me? And it's a real fucking sick situation. And it's a real lonely place to be. And this man right now is in front of his divine, feeling the wrath of his failure. It's not much different than what we went through, except we expected somebody else to do something for us. And in this situation, we begin to see an individual that takes responsibility for his actions, even though it's going to be painful, even though it's going to suck. Now he's going to accept responsibility for his actions. That's a big step for everyone that jumps onto this path. Now all of a sudden, there's no one else to blame. So we begin to accept responsibility, and that takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of honesty. That's why they're at the top of that list. Thor discovered, let's see here. Thor clenched his hands on the hammer shaft so that the knuckles whitened. And the husbandman and all his household did what was to be expected. They cried out lustily, prayed for peace, and offered in recompense all that they had. And sometimes our mistakes do cost us everything we have. Everything. And it sucks. And we have in that moment that choice to make. Do I stand up and deal with it like a man or a woman? Or do I find somebody else to blame? You can tell the weaker minded ones when they find someone else to blame. Maybe they'll grow out of it, maybe they won't. Typically, you see it mostly among men that are just turning, 18, 19 to 25, during that kind of age group, they're still struggling maybe with a mother complex. They're still might even be living at home and bitching at their mom because things ain't going right, never realizing that the things they need to take care of are the biggest challenges are right here inside them. And that's a real example there of what it means to stand up and take responsibility for your actions. It might take everything you won't stand up and fucking do it like a man. But when he saw their terror, then the fury departed from him, and he became appeased, and took of them in atonement their children, Thialfi and Roskva, who then became his bondservants, and they follow him ever since. So I don't know exactly what that entails, but in some situations, if you know something of the history, that was often a case with children would be raised by their uncles. It's also a sign of when a boy and a girl become a man or a woman, they do leave home. They do take a different path, and they follow him ever since. And there's something else there. So it's not necessarily punishment, though it might feel like one when your children leave home. They follow something else now. It's just like when Balder dies, he sends back the arm ring to his father, the chieftain that needs it. He will earn his own way through Helheim. And Nanna sends back the linen smock to his mother, and sends back a finger ring and many other gifts besides. This is a sign that there's a new woman in his life. That death that we always read about and feel sad about, that's a significant interpretation of becoming a man and becoming a woman. And it's the same thing with Thialfi and Roskva. We're tempted to believe that we feel sad for that mom and dad, and we should, because it always hurts when your children leave home. You want to hope the best for them. You hope they do right. You hope they don't follow your path. They hope that. So there's that going on too. So in that little paragraph, we see some real powerful principles at work there with regards to how this faith works, in regards to our divine, our interactions with them, families, growing up, taking responsibility, allowing your children to become men and women, allowing them to take responsibility for their fuck ups. And that's a tough thing to watch your child go through. Thereupon he left his goats behind and began his journey eastward toward Jotunheim and clear to the sea. And then he went out over the sea, that deep one. But when he came to land, he went up, and Loki and Thialfi and Roskva with him. Then when they had walked a little while, there stood before them a great forest. They walked all that day till dark. Thialfi was swiftest footed of all men. He bore Thor's bag, but there was nothing good for food. As soon as it had become dark, they sought themselves shelter for the night, and they found before them a certain hall, very great. There was a door in the end of equal width with the hall, wherein they took up quarters for the night. But about midnight there came a great earthquake, and the earth rocked under them exceedingly, and the house trembled. So when we look at that, we see the travels. So we might be 10 years down the road from some past mistake. We might be a day, we might be a week, we might be past it. We may have forgot all about it. But at some point, because he broke that thigh bone, now they don't have any goats to cook. They have no meat for the evening. He's the swiftest footed of all men, but that doesn't do him any fucking good for the fact that now he's hungry. Now we have to deal with it. Now we have to contend with that issue. And it's something that we all need to be aware of. At some point, you got to pay the piper. And that sucks. So they take refuge in a hall for the evening. And lots of time, that's what we do. We come to a crossroads. We come to a part of life we're not really sure about. We might want to hole up for a little bit, figure out what's going on. And somebody said, that's a good place to be. And so that's where we go. But sometimes what we're told may not necessarily always be what we need to hear, nor is it the instructions we need to be receiving. Then Thor rose up and called to his companion, and they explored further and found in the middle of the hall a side chamber on the right hand, and they went in there. Thor sat down in the doorway, but the others were further in from him, and they were afraid. Now that's his role as the warder of men. But Thor gripped his hammer shaft and thought to defend himself, but then they heard a great humming sound and a crashing. So they're trusting in the warder of men to defend them. Now I wonder, should we trust that same thing? Should we have some kind of aspect that if we're doing the right thing, if we are doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing, if we're living the kind of life that accepts responsibility, if we demonstrate courage and honesty, should we not expect a little strength from that? Is it not a part of who we are? Can we not call upon something within ourselves to be able to stand up and defend our home? There's something to that, isn't there? Isn't there some part of us all that wishes to feel that greatness, that challenge, the sense of victory? There's something in all of us that way. That example right there of these people together can lead you back to the Jesus take the wheel kind of bullshit. So we've got to be aware of what our role is with regards to this faith and spirituality. When we look at the Rig Thula, we understand that there's a part of the great gifts we received from Odin, Vili, and Ve, perhaps even Gefion's bloodline when she married a king. And Rig's 3 visits to the earth, the 3 generational visits from the great-grandparents, the grandparents to the mother and father. Not to create 3 classes of men, but to reintroduce that bloodline into the world until such a man might arise as can utilize the gifts he's been given to the best of his ability. I have a strong suspicion that if we begin to live according to some of the principles that we find in here, this forthright, upright, stiff upper lip, do the right thing, honest, courageous kind of lifestyle, that's when we get to tap into the ability of understanding we have what it takes in ourselves to stand in the doorway, so to speak. We also need to train a little bit too. You know, if you go out there and you ain't trained in anything, you're going to get hurt. But there's something to all that. And there's something we need to consider when we think about these things, not just the face value of the words. Where's the deeper meaning of all of this stuff? Is there a deeper meaning to all of this stuff? And that's what we've got to consider when we read that. And if we begin to find deeper and deeper meanings and understandings to this, then we need to take a good look on it. Should we be holding this with special regard? And I would submit to you that, yes, indeed, we absolutely should be. But when it drew near dawn, then Thor went out and saw a man lying a little way from him in the wood, and that man was not small. He slept and snored mightily. Then Thor thought he could perceive what kind of noise it was which they had heard during the night. He girded himself with his belt of strength, and his divine power waxed half again as much. And on the instant the man awoke and rose up swiftly. And then it is said that the first time Thor's heart failed him to strike him with the hammer. He asked him his name, and the man called himself Skrymir. But I have no need, he said, to ask thee for thy name. I know that thou art Asatru. But what, hast thou dragged away my glove? Then Skirnir stretched out his hand and took up the glove, and at once Thor saw that it was that which he had taken for a haul during the night. And as for the side chamber, that was the thumb of the glove. Let's take a think about that just for a second. Get up in the morning and you become aware of the giant on the doorstep. Now, in today's world, as we're looking around, many of us have taken almost, if you might consider it for a moment, refuge on social media to meet with each other, to band together, to exchange information and ideas, to talk, to share the power of this faith. And then be kind of shaky ground over there. So then we moved over here to this thumb, and now we're on a whole nother platform, and we begin to shake this ground. But what we're becoming aware of is the size of the giant allied against us. And we have some big enemies. There are people dedicated to making sure that our ability to follow this spirituality and path is not available to us. Now, is that kind of a grand statement? Is it an overarching conspiracy of any one organization? The temptation to appreciate that is the temptation to fall into the ideas of being a victim. And I think it's a real slippery slope. While we might identify the size of that giant, to be afraid of it or to let our heart fail in front of it is a real challenge for many of us. We can see it now clearly, what's going on again. We just had a president steal an election and nobody said a word. That's the size of the giant against us. We have banking conglomerates all over the world that are fixing to ruin our dollar. That's the size of the giant against us. And we're hiding in their glove. How do we deal with that? What kind of, well, I'll tell you one thing we can't do is we can't let our hearts falter in the moment. We cannot stop for a second living this life and being the best examples of what it means to be an independent, powerful, sovereign man or woman, to be the individual who has accumulated some success. See, we're not reinventing the wheel here. The Mormons did it 150 years ago. Now look at them. We're literally watching a community out there in Utah that I assure you someday will rival the Catholic Church in power and authority. Don't think it won't. I don't care if it is Space Jesus. People believe in it. People believe in it enough to give 10% of their money every month to it religiously. And look what they've built in 150 years. At one time, you could kill a Mormon in Missouri because he was a Mormon. And they were run out of every community east of the Rocky Mountains. Every single, no. You get your multi-wife having bunch of kids. No, we can't feed them. Get out of here. So they literally built hand carts and walked across the Great Plains because their great inspired leader said to do it. And they found something to believe in and they stuck with it. So we've got something that's an oral tradition, which could be tens of thousands of years old for all we know. Parts of it may even be from who knows what. Could be from the last interglacial period. We don't know, but it's a tale that's been told many times. So we need to, at some point, begin to read these words with the idea that I can believe in that. And that means I can believe in me. And if I find somebody else that believes in that, I don't care if he hates anything. I don't care if he's part of Aryan Brotherhood. I don't care if he's a universalist. I really don't care what he's a part of. If he believes in that, there's a starting point where we can begin an association. Now, I may not subscribe to it, and I may think some of it's dumb as hell. That's not anything I'm interested in. What I'm interested in is, do they buy into this? Does it help them live the life they want to live? Are they living like a victor or a victim? And that's where the real rubber meets the road with all of this. Whatever the case, we can't let our heart fail when we figure out the size of the giants arrayed against us. And it might be as simple as you find another bag of yay or some dirty or, whatever you're looking for. That might be the giant against you. It might be chasing the dragon for all I know. But for whatever you got to deal with, there's a giant you're going to have to deal with. All right, where I lost my place. Then Skrymir stretched out his hand and took up the glove, and at once Thor saw that it was that which he had taken for a haul during the night. And as for the side chamber, it was the thumb of the glove. Skrymir asked whether Thor would have his company, and Thor assented to this. Then Skrymir took and unloosened his provision wallet and made ready to eat his morning meal, and Thor and his fellows in another place. Skrymir then proposed to them to lay their supply of food together, and Thor assented. Then Skrymir bound all the food in one bag and laid it on his own back. He went before during the day and stepped with very great strides, but late in the evening, Skrymir found them night quarters under a certain great oak. Then Skrymir said to Thor that he would lay him down to sleep, and do ye take the provision bag and make ready for your supper. It's almost like physician, heal thyself, isn't it? Doctor gets sick, you're going to tell him, well, here, you're a doctor, fix yourself. When we begin to rely on somebody else for the quality and well-being of who we are, we're creating a risk. We're creating a weakness. When we begin to depend upon the determinations of what is right and wrong for the quality of our life to other people, we're exposing a flank, so to speak. No greater example can be that than they gave all their food to somebody they thought they could believe in. We put all our trust into a system we thought we could believe in. And something's not right. Something's changed. And we're over here trying to be responsible and take responsibility for ourselves. Self-reliance and perseverance all of a sudden come into play. And I know it sounds silly, but that interaction with the earth from which all good things come is essential to our well-being. Our ability to plant a garden, or at least if you're in an apartment, plant a container garden, grow a little bit of food, offset your stuff, go to a butcher, buy a cow, do something to be responsible for yourself and your own well-being. Put solar panels on your home. Cut your electric bill. Quit depending on somebody else. Those people in Texas you watch, solar's going to boom. All that down there. They're going to take a good look at Utah, there are so many people in Utah generating their own electricity that the substations are having to be redesigned to accept electricity coming in from what usually has been going out. Look at Arizona. They're doing the same thing. Guy's got 5 air conditioners on his house to keep it cool, covered it in solar panels. He ain't got an electric bill. Yeah, it takes money, it takes responsibility. That goes back to our ability to get involved in something that allows us to be successful. People hate the idea of money, and it ain't everything, but I promise you this, it works best in the medium it was designed for, and that is to spend. But why do we continue to give it to somebody else, people who are making decisions about the quality of our well-being, when they don't have our best interests at heart at all? They're making business decisions for the shareholder. Who cares if we're going to have rolling brownouts or your food in your refrigerator might spoil because, well, some environmental group decided that those power lines were going to cause forest fires, or we've stopped all the logging so the forest fires are going to burn everything around it, or we've built these windmills and when the ice gets on them, they break apart. Now we can't generate electricity, or all of the failures that we just saw with that winter storm. We'll forget about that by the middle of summer. We'll forget all about it. Well, it's a little too, it costs. In our lore, it tells us right there, don't give all the quality, don't give your food to some dickhead that's going to walk away from you. And we do it every day. We sacrifice the authority of our own being to individuals who could care less whether or not we live or die. Then they ask us to put on a mask and get a vaccine. Are you shitting me? Give me a break. Thereupon Skrymir slept and snored hard. And see, I really don't like him now. And it's kind of like that. It's a constant buzz in our ear on the news, 24/7, just being fed news all day long, all night long, again and again and again, the same half-truths, the same lies. It's a constant snoring of somebody you don't like snoring in the bed next to you. It's the same thing. And then Thor took the provision bag and set about to unloosen it, but such things must be told as will seem incredible. He got no knot. He got no knot loosened and no thong in stirred, and so as to be looser than before. So it's the same thing with us. Let's say your gas gets cut off on accident, or something breaks in the gas line. You're going to call that gas company and complain and bitch and whine and piss, moan, scream, and nothing's going to happen. You're not going to get it on. If they can't get it to you, you ain't going to get it. Maybe I should have taken responsibility for some of this myself and I wouldn't be in this situation. But we've all grown up in an area where all of the stuff we work so we can pay for all of the comforts that come into our home. We're just conditioned to think that way. That may not, our great grandparents probably didn't grow up that way. Their parents didn't grow up that way. Our grandparents in the Depression got a real ugly look at it. When the Great Depression hit us, oh shit, I need to remember this. They're all gone now. And we're having to figure it out. I think in this case, our gods have literally thrown us a lifeline to remind us, hey, you might want to be rethinking some of that stuff. It's not reject the comforts of the modern world. It's not roughing it. There's so much of that stuff out now. Canada has a solar panel now that has 98% efficiency. This light shining on my face right now will generate electricity. Back and forth. Right now, there is a company in Utah, Green Power, I think, something like that. They're building solar powered generators and dropping them off in the jungles of Central America. So now all of a sudden a literal village with chickens running around on a dirt road and grass huts and all that nonsense. These jokers have electric power, lights in their huts, satellite TV, internet, because they're using the power of the sun. it's changing the dynamics of a resource-rich part of the world. And that's something we need to be aware of too. Why they're all coming up here, I don't know, but probably because it's easier and they got to do it themselves. That's the thing. When he saw that this work might not avail, then he became angered, gripped the hammer Mjolnir in both hands, and strode with great strides to that place where Skrymir lay and smote him in the head. Skrymir awoke and asked whether a leaf had fallen upon his head or whether they had eaten and were ready for bed. And that's about as effective as it is when we make a shitty comment on social media. Did a leaf fall? Oh, you don't like that Gina Carano got fired by Kathleen Kennedy? Tough shit. You know, I really think that more often we need to be saying that term when people get utterly butthurt about some kind of social injustice. Somebody needs to start saying, you know what, tough shit. You know, if they don't like it, do something different. You know, it doesn't, why does it got to come out of me? Tough shit. I need to make bumper stickers that say tough shit. Anyway, Thor replied that they were just then about to go to sleep and then went under another oak. It must be told there that there was no fearless sleeping, so they were kind of nervous. And once you get kicked off of social media, there's much wailing and gnashing of teeth until we find another social media to begin getting upset on and making shitty posts and pointing out the injustices of the world. Well, we need to be looking first right here. At midnight, Thor heard Skrymir snored and slept fast, so that it thundered in the woods. Then he stood and went to him, shook his hammer eagerly and hard, and smote down upon the middle of his crown. He saw that the face of the hammer sank deep into his head, and at that moment Skrymir awoke and said, "What is it now? Did some acorn fall on my head, or what is the news with thee, Thor?" But Thor went back speedily and replied that he was but new awakened, and said that it was then midnight, and yet there was time to sleep. So he went out and did his level best to lay the smack down on that candy ass, and it didn't work. We do the same thing. I will say though that Reddit had a good job when they did the GameStop stock deal. That was brilliant. That was a little more than the acorn falling on his head. That's the kind of stuff we need to be thinking about doing. When we all can appreciate a course of action that elevates us into the kind of positions we wish to be in, that's what we need to be celebrating. You know, there was a concept when I was growing up that the grandparents and the parents, they always used, and I think it's something we might need to begin addressing in Asatru. There was a time in polite conversation when people didn't talk about religion or politics. It simply wasn't done. And now it's done on a regular basis. And look at the fucking mess it's caused for everybody. What if in Asatru we were to sit down and say, I believe that. I'm gonna make offering sacrifice, I'll stand and bloat. And we respect that and then leave it alone. And quit worrying about whether or not they hate somebody as much as we do. Or we hate somebody as much as they do. What if we were to set a principle that said, in polite conversation amongst good heathens that are successful and upstanding members of their community, we're not going to discuss some of those other points to try to determine the quality of the other's heathenry. That might take us a long way. See, boom, I just solved the entirety of the heathen community's problem. God damn, that's a tool. Thor meditated that if he could get to strike him a third blow, never should the giant see himself again. That's kind of where we are. We've been hoodwinked and bamboozled and lied to by lesser men who have no quality or understanding or comprehension of the lore. We have got society talking to us about this bullshit and that bullshit, outrage culture and cancel culture, and we really want to just smack it down. And we're sitting, and these people are going, how did you become so hateful? Bitch, you made me that way, you know? And there's a lot of people I personally know that are sitting there gripping that hammer thinking, if I could get a third blow. So have any of us created enough success to build our own Google? Because those are the goals we need to be looking for. We don't need to be looking for another platform of some bastards that might change their mind because of ad pressure from Coca-Cola. We need to be looking at setting our own platform up. We need to be looking at creating our own networks. We need to be looking at building these communities. Those Mormons and Muslims, they'll move into a small town. They'll stay there for a little bit. They'll run for political office at the local level, become the mayor. And the next thing you know, the whole place has changed. Can we not do the same thing? Well, we could if we weren't sitting there trying to determine the quality of each other's heathenry by whether or not they believe in this or that. Maybe we should begin to think about those things. Let's talk about building some successful people instead of building people that are most keenly aware of the giant laying in the yard. Hell yeah, I see the damn thing too. Oh, fuck. But you're going to hide behind a bush and all of a sudden I don't know. You got to tell me about it. I see it. I have money to make. I have a family to raise. I have success to build. I want to be that example of everything positive this espouses. And then whether or not you want me to bitch about that ain't going to change a thing. Personally, I ain't got time for much of it anymore. I can listen to about 10 minutes of it, and it makes me, just ain't got time for it. He lay now and watched where the screener was sleeping soundly a little before day. And when he perceived the screener must have fallen asleep, he stood up at once and rushed over to him, brandished his hammer with all his strength, and smote upon that one of his temples which was turned up. But Screener sat up and stroked his cheek and said, "Some birds must be sitting in the tree above me, I imagined when I woke, that some dirt from the twigs fell upon my head. Art thou awake, Thor?" It's a humiliating thing to go out and give it your best shot and fall on your face. And any of us who have ever dealt with any kind of failure understand exactly what he's feeling right now. He went over there and did his level best to get rid of an enemy, and he could not do it. Why? Well, it wasn't because he wasn't strong enough. It wasn't because he didn't know what he was doing. He simply gave it his best and fell on his face. It will be time to arise and clothe us, but now ye have no long journey forward to the castle called Utgard. I have heard how ye have whispered among yourselves that I am no little man in stature, but ye shall see taller men if ye come into Utgard. Now I will give you wholesome advice. Do not conduct yourselves boastfully, for the henchmen of Utgard or Loki will not well endure big words from such swaddling babes. That's kind of the thing that's been told to us, isn't it? Well, we have these gigantic tech corporations and bank conglomerates and the government and the liberal Democrat and Antifa and all these other nonsensical cancel culture ideas. Well, we don't want to be boastful babes or we'll get squashed. And I've heard people say, once you get out there and do something about it, well, we have too much to lose. Bullshit, wrong answer. Lose like I haven't lost everything before. What have we got to lose? Our future for our children? That might be something worth gambling for. So let's think about that. See, and that's what we're being told today as a whole. As a whole. Well, you can't use that symbol on social media because it stands for hate. Says who? That one of those Utgard Loki giant henchmen. The size of the giant we've got to contend with, we've got to be aware of. We're not aware of it. Here's an idea. Let's all buy stock in those companies. And when it comes time to vote in the shareholder, let's vote some of these dumbasses on the board of directors out. You know, the ones that can't seem to fire the idiots that come up that say, make potato head, not Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head. That might be an idea. We'd also become very rich if we did it. Anyway, he said, but if not so, then turn back, and I think it were better for you that you do that. But if ye will go forward, then turn to the east. As for me, I hold my way north to these hills, which ye may now see. Scrimer took the provision bag and cast it on his back and turned from them across the forest, and it was not recorded that the Aesir bade him Godspeed. So not only did they not say goodbye, bastard stole all their fucking food too. Did you see that little sleight of hand trick? He got it all. He just threw that bag up, didn't untie it once for him, just snuck off with everything they had. Take a look at your paycheck every week. See how much they're taking. We'll give it back to you at the end of the year. A little low interest loan, no interest loan. Oh, thank you. Bastards. Thor turned forward on his way and his fellows and went onward till midday. Then they saw a castle standing on a certain plain and set their necks down on their backs before they could see up over it. And that must be a hell of a trick. Then went to the cattle, and there was grating in front of the castle gate, and it was closed. Thor went up to the grating and did not succeed in opening it. But when they struggled to make their way in, they crept between the bars and came in that way. They saw a great hall and went thither. The door was open. Then they went in and saw many men on two benches. Most of them were big enough. Thereupon they came before the king, Utgarda-Loki, and saluted him. But he looked at them in his own good time and smiled scornfully over his teeth and said, "It is late to ask tidings of a long journey, or is it otherwise than I think that this toddler is Oku Thor? Yet thou mayest be greater than thou appearest to me. What manner of accomplishments are those which thou and thy fellows think to be ready for? No one shall be here with us who knows not some kind of craft or cunning surpassing most men." So he laid him down a challenge. Anytime somebody boasts like that, it means they are prepared. It means they have a firm belief in their mind that they are going to get the upper hand, that they have the upper hand, that they're in charge, and you're going to have to earn your place here. And you can be rest assured the deck's going to be stacked against you. Goddamn, all of a sudden I got stuttering idiot over here. Quit. So they got to prove themselves. In a similar way, we got to prove ourselves too. But these contests that we're fixing to contend with, this is not our platform. This is not the contest we need to be engaging in. This is not what it's all about. Yeah, that's my dad's. So here we go. Let's start with it. So the first one that jumped up, then spoke the one who came last, who was called Loki. Sure as shit. Somebody threw down some boastful pride, and the ego is going to jump in there like John Wayne. Hold my beer. I got this. That's exactly what just happens here. I know such a trick, which I am ready to try, that there is no one within here who shall eat his food more quickly than I. Well, that's a hell of a thing to tell everybody how much of a glutton you are. Watch me eat this. But it's also pretty smart because they're hungry. Then Utgarda-Loki answered, "That is a feat if thou accomplish it, and this feat shall accordingly put to the proof." He called to the farther end of the bench that he was called Loki should come forth on the floor and try his prowess against Loki. Then a trough was taken and borne in upon the hall floor and filled with flesh. Loki sat down at the one end and Loki at the other, and each ate as fast as he could. When they met in the middle of the trough, by that time Loki had eaten all of the meat from the bones. But Loki likewise had eaten all of the meat and the bones with it and the trough too. And now it seemed as if all of Loki had lost the game. So was he competing on an even field? Sure don't seem like it. That's your ego right there. That's the part of you that tells you you're more, well, I can out eat anybody. Watch me. I'm going to eat 1,000 hot dogs, or, I know, right? You got to be careful with them wieners. You get hold of a bad one, make the corner of your mouth hurt. Then Utgarda-Loki asked what yonder man could play at, and Thialfi answered that he would undertake to run a race with whomever Utgarda-Loki would bring up. Then Utgarda-Loki said that was a good accomplishment. Pretty good, but then there was a great likelihood that he must be well endowed with fleetness if he were to perform that feat, yet he would speedily see to the matter, should be tested. Then Utgarda-Loki arose and went out, and there was a good course to run over on the level plain. Then Utgarda-Loki called to him a certain lad who was named Hugi, and bade him run a match against Thialfi, and then held the first heat. And Hugi was much ahead that he turned to meet Thialfi at the end of the course. Then said Utgarda-Loki, "Thou wilt need to lay thyself forward more, Thialfi, if thou art to win the game." And that's it. We're out there that's like a football player trying to play hockey. You're going to have to lean into it a little bit. You have to try a little bit harder if you want to win the game. If we want to be successful, we are going to try a little bit harder. And the thing is, there's always going to be somebody in front of us. There's always going to be somebody better. That's just life. But that doesn't mean you don't try. And I see sometimes that happen, especially with younger minds, still trying to figure out who they are. Embrace the suck. Embrace the challenge. Don't be intimidated by the size of the giant. Lean into it a little bit more. But it is nonetheless true that never have any man come hither who seemed to me fleeter of foot than this. So he recognizes he's trying. And then he began another heat, and when Hugi had reached the course's end and was turning back, there was still a long bolt shot to Thialfi. Then spake Utgard Loki, Thialfi appears to me to run this course well, but I do not believe of him now that he will win the game. But it will be made manifest presently when they run the third heat. And then they began the heat. But when Hugi had come to the end of the course and turned back, Thialfi had not yet reached mid-course. Then all said that the game had been proven. So he went out there and once again put forth his best and fell. That's hard to do. So they're being demoralized. Little victories are being stolen from them. And little victories are being stolen from us. Next, Utgard Loki asked Thor that what feats there were which he might desire to show before them, such great tales as men has made of his mighty works. Then Thor answered that he would most willingly undertake to contend with any in drinking. Yeah. Utgard Loki said that might be well. He went into the hall and called his serving boy and bade him bring the sconce horn, which the henchmen were wont to drink of. Straightway the serving lad came forward with a horn and put it into Thor's hand. Then Utgard Loki, it is held that this horn is well drained if it is drunk off in one drink. But some drink it off in two, but no one is so poor a man at drinking that it fails to drain off in three. Standard's been set. Thor looked upon the horn and it did not seem big to him, and yet it was somewhat long. Still, he was very thirsty. He took and drank and swallowed enormously, and thought that he should not need to bend oftener to the horn. But when his breath failed and he raised his head from the horn and looked to see how it had gone with the drinking, it seemed to him that very little space by which the drink was lower now in the horn than before. Then said Utgard Loki, it is well drunk, and not too much. I should not have believed it if it had told me that Asatru could not drink a greater draught. So now he's goading him. But I know that thou wilt wish to drink it off in another draught. Thor answered nothing. He set the horn to his mouth, and thinking now that he should drink a greater drink, and struggled with the draught till his breath gave out. And yet he saw that the tip of the horn would not come up so much as he liked. When he took the horn from his mouth and looked into it, it seemed to him then as if it had decreased less than the former time. And now there was clearly apparent lowering in the horn. Then said Utgard Loki, how now, Thor? Thou wilt not shrink from one more drink, then it may be well for thee. If thou drink the third drop from the horn, it seems to me of this must be esteemed the greatest, but thou canst not be called so great a man here among us as the Aesir call thee, if thou give not a better account of thyself on the other games than it seems to me may come of this. Then Thor became angry, set the horn to his mouth, and drank with all his might, and struggled with the drink as much as he could. And when he looked into the horn, at least some space had been made. Then he gave up the horn and would drink no more. Then said Utgard Loki, see, in a frat house, that's usually what kills him. Then said Utgard Loki, now it is evident that thy prowess is not so great as we thought it to be. But wilt thou try thy hand at more games? It may readily be seen that thou gettest no advantage thereof. Thor answered, we'll make trial of yet other games, but it would have seemed wonderful to me when I was at home with the Aesir if such drinks had been called so little. But what game will you offer me now? Then said Utgard Loki, young lads here want to do this, which is thought of small consequence. Lift my cat up from the earth. But I should not have been able to speak of such a thing to Asatru if I had not seen that thou hast far less in thee than I thought. Thereupon he leaped forth in the great hall, a gray cat, and a very big one. Thor went to it and took it with his hand down under the middle of the belly and lifted up. But the cat bent into the arch just as Thor stretched up his hands. And when Thor reached up as high as he could at the very utmost, then the cat lifted up 1 foot. And Thor got his game no further advanced. Then said Utgard Loki, this game went even as I had foreseen. The cat is very great, whereas Thor is low and little besides the huge men who are here with us. Damn. Then said Thor, little as ye call me, let any one of you come now and wrestle with me. Now I am angry. Then Utgard Loki answered, looking about him on the benches, and spake, I see no such man here within who would not hold it a disgrace to wrestle with thee. And yet he said, let us see. See, that's something that they always tell us too. You know, they call it you Nazi and racist and homophobe and bigot. That's what they're trying to do. They're just trying to disgrace someone who's trying to do what he thinks is right with regards to his life. And sometimes we do the same thing when we talk about universalists or anything else. It's not comely, or it's not becoming of us to offer those criticisms of others simply to make ourselves feel better or to try to put somebody else in our place. I think maybe we should be looking at that in a stronger term, because our only goal, we've got to get laser focused in on our only goal, and that is becoming what we're supposed to become. I don't have time for distractions. I don't care about what anybody else does. I got shit to do. But they're baiting him. They're using his anger against him. They're goading him into actions. So let us see first. Let the old woman, my nurse, be called hither, Ellie, and let Thor wrestle with her if she will. She has thrown such men as have seemed to me no less strong than Thor. Straightway there came into the hall an old woman, stricken in years. Then Utgard Loki said that she should grapple with Asatru. There is no need to make a long matter of it. That struggle went in such wise that the harder Thor strove in gripping, the faster she stood. And then the old woman essayed a hold, and then Thor became totty on his feet, and their tuggings were very hard. Yet it was not long before Thor fell to his knee on one foot. Then Utgard Loki went up and bade them cease the wrestling, saying that Thor should not need to challenge more men of his bodyguard to wrestling. By then it had passed toward night. Utgard Loki showed Thor and his companions to a seat, and they tarried there the night long in cheer. But at morning, as soon it dawned, Thor and his companions arose, clothed themselves, and were ready to go. Excuse me. Then there came Utgard Loki and caused a table to be set for them, and there was no lack of good cheer, meat, and drink. As soon as they had eaten, he went out from the castle with them, and at parting, Utgard Loki spoke to Thor, and asked how he thought his journey had ended, or whether he had met any man mightier than himself. Thor answered that he could not say that he had not got much shame in their dealings together. But yet I know that you will call me a man of little might, and I am ill content with that. Then said Utgard Loki, now I will tell you the truth. Now that thou art come out of the castle, and if I live and am able to prevail, then thou shalt never again come into it. And this I know by my troth. But that thou shouldst never have come into it if I had known before that thou had so much strength in thee, and that thou shouldst so nearly have had us in great peril. But I made ready against the eye illusions, and I came upon you the first time in the wood, and when thou wouldst have unloosened the provision bag, I had bound it with iron, and thou didst not find where to undo it. But next thou didst smite me 3 blows with the hammer, and the first was least. And yet it was so great that it would suffice to slay me if it had come upon me. And when thou sawest near my hall a saddled back mountain cut into the top of 3 square dales, the one the deepest, those were the marks of thy hammer. Moved mountains because he had to. Didn't even know he was doing it. He was just doing what he does. And even though he couldn't see the results of his effort, those efforts still bore fruit in the eyes of many others. So it was also with the games in which he did contend against my henchmen. That was the first which Loki did. He was very hungry and ate zealously, but he who was called Loki was wildfire, and he burned the trough no less swiftly than the meat. And then with the Alfie ran the race with him called Hugi. That was my thought. And it was not to be expected of the Alfie that he should match swiftness with it. Moreover, when thou didst drink from the horn, it seemed to thee to go slowly. Then by my faith, that was a wonder which I should not have believed possible. The other end of the horn was out in the sea, but thou didst not perceive it. But now, when thou comest to the sea, Thou shalt be able to mark what a diminishing thou hast drunk in the sea, and this is henceforth called ebb tides. And again he said, it seemed to me not less noteworthy, when thou didst lift up the cat, to tell thee truly, then all were afraid who saw how thou didst lift 1 foot clear of the earth. That cat was not what it appeared to be. It was the Midgard serpent, which lies about all the land, and scarcely does its length suffice to encompass the earth with head and tail. So high didst thou stretch up thine arms, that it was then but a little way more to heaven. It was also a great marvel concerning the wrestling match. But when thou didst understand how long, and didst not fall more than on one knee, wrestling with Eli, since none such has ever been, and none shall be, if he become old as to abide old age, that she shall not cause him to fall. When we get out there and struggle and give it our best, we need to make sure what we're struggling against. There are so many, like I've said, half-truths and bald-faced lies we contend with on a daily basis in our society. If it's not aligning with our purpose, if it's not a part of our plan, if it's not a part of our game as individuals to become successful in what we do and abide by these principles we find meted out in this lore, we don't need to waste our time with it. Are we arguing with idiots on the internet? Why am I wasting my time on that? I have other things to do. I need to be researching ways to make additional revenue. I need to be researching ways to plan my day better, so I might work and get overtime, do whatever, or whatever I need to do so I might be successful for my family to have a future. I have more than one stream of income. That's the way it's always going to be with me, because that's part of my plan. I'm not contending with individuals who are out trying to sucker me into some kind of nonsense. Every time we get baited into believing somebody else's lie, we miss the mark. Every time we fail to pay attention to the wisdom found in other sources, we're missing the point. It doesn't mean we got to follow that path, but we do. Having the understanding of where these things come from, whoever says it, doesn't really matter who says it. Pay attention to it, learn from it. Doesn't mean you got to invite them to the table. Doesn't mean they're going to marry your daughter. I mean, good night. Pay attention to where you earn your wisdom. Pay attention to the games you wish to compete in. Do we want to compete in a game with a big tech corporation? Well, shit, no. We might as well just disappear in the world of people. We'll be back to like we were living in the 80s. Well, how terrible would that be? Shit. But same thing with our politics. Same thing with our faith. Be aware of the game you're competing in. As long as you're aware of that game you're competing in, you stand a chance of making some headway. You stand a chance of building yourself into somebody worth paying attention to. They lost all of those games, but you know what every one of them did? They put their best foot forward, and other people noticed. Even if you don't see the success of your efforts right away, it doesn't mean you don't keep trying, because I promise you, somebody else around is paying attention. You might be the only example of a heathen anybody ever gets to meet. And if you're stepping forward with your best foot, it's going to make an impression. Make sure it's a positive one. Make sure it's a strong one. And I think that's about all I got for tonight. Anybody got any questions? No? Well, tomorrow's Monday. I don't know what you're going to be doing on Monday, but whatever you do, grab it by the nose and whip its ass.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brian.
Hey, hail Thor and hail Odin, and thanks for all you do.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. Hey.
Yeah, and thanks for your service, man. Couple quick, not questions per se, but quick comment. I like what you said about, basically don't be intimidated by the size of the Jotuns against you.
Yeah.
Musashi said something similar. You probably know about that one.
The Book of Five Rings.
Exactly. Something that came across my YouTube algorithm there about that. So
Yeah, mine came from my dad who said, if you don't whip his ass, I'm gonna whip your ass.
Yeah, I had that too. So yeah, exactly.
Or if you tell him that, yeah, if you
Wisdom's
tell
where you find it.
yes, exactly right.
Another thing,
Yeah.
please refrain in the future, if you might, from bad references to Pay the Piper.
Okay. I get you.
I'm a bit of a piper, and you know that's always bothered me. You know, it's like, why is it always in a freaking negative term? You know, so that's why I never do a wedding or a funeral, because you fuck that up. You know.
Oh yeah, you won't ever live it down. I can deal with that. I'm good with it.
And, hold on, I made another note.
Oh shit.
Oh yeah, never the 80s. Never. Remember that from the military. Never. So yeah, we're done with that shit. I like the internet. You know, I make my living sort of on the web design and all that. So
I get a royalty check every month from the books that I sell online from Amazon.
So you know, Wolverines, but damn, we need that Skylink.
Yeah, we do. And my son saw it the other night, and he's like, "Dad, there's a UFO." I'm like, "It probably ain't, son." And then we looked it up, and it was that Google. It was like 60. He counted them. There was a bunch of them all in a row going over Oklahoma.
That's cool until they start falling, I reckon.
You know, I wonder how much space junk really is up there.
Oh, dude, all you got to do is just Google that. You don't want to see the map.
I'm sure I don't. If it would deflect an asteroid, we might be okay.
Yeah, if only, right?
Bastards. Oh, don't worry. A good solar flare will get rid of it all.
Well, there you go.
Well, I appreciate your feedback,
brother. I'll shut up now.
No, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate the feedback. I really do.
Yeah. Well, hell.
Hell.
Hey, Sean wanted me to make sure I said thank you. I was going to just put it in the chat, but there wasn't a chat function.
Well, okay. Yeah, I appreciate it. It's good to see you guys. I'm glad to see you're doing well.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, come a long way.
Yes, you have. You absolutely have.
Yeah. We do want to have a sanctuary and a half of our own in a couple years, but we'll see.
No, we're going to get it.
We are.
That laser focus
Might not be
you
2
talked
years.
about.
It's just one step at a time. And if it's when you're doing that stuff and you create that focus and you begin to work on just that, things begin to fall into place the way they're supposed to.
Mhm.
And it's amazing how it works, but it does work. Just keep trying.
All
Put your best
started
foot-
as a horg.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. Somebody thought, let's build streets. Now look at the shit. Somebody had a thought, I'm gonna put up some street lamps. Now look at it. You know, somebody thought, I'm gonna use a signal and build a television. Well, now look at it. It was all a thought in somebody's mind before any of it became a reality. There's no reason you can't have the same success.
Until the FBI comes in and takes all your Tesla stuff away.
One of these days, you know what?
That's why we have the animal sanctuary.
There you go. I'd be like the Tiger King. I am from Oklahoma.
No, I'll be the pig.
You know,
I'll be the pig queen. Look at her. Look at her. Can you see her?
yes.
Oh, so cute.
The baby. We actually rescued one that was pregnant.
Just don't name them Bacon, please.
No,
You bought one that was pregnant?
There are babies.
Well, good.
Yeah. But it's yeah. But man, I wish that idea would permeate, that one that you said about just worry about what you're doing.
Yeah.
Don't worry about trying to
Yeah.
out heat and all that shit.
Well, it's hard, you know, it's really hard when we don't have a real clear goal of what it's supposed to look like to be a successful practitioner of Asatru. You know, what does that really look like? And so the tendency, it's just human nature, is to want to build myself up into something I'm not by denigrating that person over there. And I will liberally do it against a couple of people because I'm a dick. But when we begin to take these ideas that really don't do anything for us and make them a litmus test for the quality of my heathenry, we do ourselves a discredit. We're selling ourselves short. We're fighting in a game. We're contending in a contest that we're never going to win. And so I think you're right. I really don't care what anybody does. If they want to be happy, go be happy.
when somebody
like-
really understands the concept of Utengard and Innengard,
Yeah,
and
it's a
that
much
becomes
different
much
thing.
less of an issue.
It sure does. It absolutely does. You know,
Well, I
not
don't
everybody's
wanna
going to sit at my
forsake
table.
I don't want to forsake wisdom from any direction, like you were mentioning earlier. Like I might not practice or stand in a circle with certain other people, but that doesn't mean I'm not gonna, read something from the trough because they have good literature too. I'm just maybe not gonna do their things, but I like Diana Paxton's writing, but
Yep.
like in piecemeal, like there's certain things, but if I close my mind to all of that and just assassinated their characters all day, I would have missed out on a lot of information.
Did you
Right,
see the
brother.
interview I did with Freya Aswin? It's on my YouTube channel. I did an interview with Freya Aswin. She's a really neat cat.
Yeah.
Awesome.
She made one comment in there that was just a foundation of wisdom. She said it all comes from the same well.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
I was like, holy shit. She was writing the foreword for a person who considered himself very focused, and she had just finished doing something for somebody who considered herself very universalist. And I think the older we get, the more freedom we have to take the actions we want to take. We're not so captivated by being perceived through the lens of acceptance, as Master Chim said.
Yeah.
That
Yeah. We
there's a lot-
kind of lose the zealotry that kind of comes with not just a bigotry towards other people, but other people's ideas too.
Right.
Our
I,
ideas.
I enjoyed Paxton's book on Odin. I thought it was very informative in some ways, but it doesn't mean I agree with all the other stuff.
Right.
Yeah, the ability to sort the wheat from the chaff is a very important skill to understand.
There was I know we all, Brian, I know you're familiar, but I don't know everybody else. I assume you are. You've been around for a while, but there was little Thor who died a
Yes.
few years ago of cancer.
Oh,
Yes.
remember, yes.
And when having kids not much younger than him at the time, I watched everybody, Folkish, Universalist, Troth, AFA, everybody, independent folks, everybody from we're all just completely supportive of his parents and very empathetic and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My point being this, that I decided, and I sent it to his father, that in his memory, I refuse to cut people off, to disconnect from folks based on the way that they practice heathenry. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm agree with heathen communists, right? So
Right.
there are other reasons. But if somebody's a universalist and they want to sit next to whoever and ensemble, I might not do it, but I'm not going to immediately say, oh, they're wrong and fuck them and
Right.
Oh, we're on YouTube, so pardon me. In the same way, if somebody is an extreme folkish person, and I'm very tribalist, right? So I think that we accept, that we, in my view, we work as tribes. And if you accept somebody in your tribe and I accept your tribe, then I'm going to accept whoever you accept into your tribe. It doesn't matter to me. But I get that, so I don't know. It just really, since we're on the topic, his battle and passing really affected me. And
It did me too.
you can't cut off wisdom from wherever it comes from. And everybody universally, from one spectrum of heathenry to the other spectrum, was pulling for him and praying for him and and making offerings for him and
Yeah.
beseeching the gods for him. When this little boy was sick, it didn't matter who else. It didn't matter about
You know
differences.
what?
We all agreed on this one thing.
You know what? You have to wonder if that wasn't a lesson we were all being taught. We fucking ignored it.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm trying to say, brother.
Right?
Well, remember, Har says something to the effect of "Don't be the first to break a friendship," right? So,
Right. It's true. It's very true. Well, guys, I appreciate your time and your input. I really do. As always, it's a pleasure. This is my this keeps me going as much as it does anybody else. And I really appreciate it. Thank you all for joining in.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Great to see you. Hope to
Thanks,
see you again.